Thank you very much. I'd like to just see a show of hands. How many of you are still undecided in the presidential election? Okay. Go home. So tonight, we are not going to talk politics much. The politics we're going to discuss is ancient politics. There are handouts right over there, which you are welcome quietly to get. Right over here. Help yourself. We're ready? Okay, here we go. So the politics we're going to discuss tonight is from around 1200 BCE. So it's a long, long, long time ago. But as you will see from our discussion of it, the passions are still quite hot. Those of you who are squeamish, I want to give you a spoiler alert. There's going to be some blood spilled tonight. Those of you who remember the Babbitt story, remember the woman with the kitchen knife? Just be advised that she was practicing traditional family values as expressed by the Bible, as demonstrated by this story. This is also a story about the violence that can happen in your temple. So you'll want to be thinking about that as well. The other thing I would like to advise is to the gentlemen in the room that when you go to sleep tonight, you wear some kind of army helmet, something with stainless steel. Ladies, this story is not meant to be a how-to. This is really not a good way to handle your domestic squabbles. Right? There are other ways to do it. There are silencers. We have machine guns. Things have evolved. Okay, so I'm not advocating what's in this story, but I am going to teach it because it is one of the zestier stories in the Bible. And what I love about this story is that it's a story of constant surprises. Nobody expects what's about to happen. Nobody is looking at any place. And from the very beginning of the story, where we're shocked by the way it opens, to the very end, it's just surprise after surprise after surprise. And it is especially surprising because, and I hope I'm not saying anything shocking. Is this okay for you? Okay. Just want to make sure that our studio audience at home is able to still follow along. So part of what is shocking about this, and I hope this is not big news, is that the Bible was written by men. And it was not only written by men, it was written for men. Right? Now, for those of you who still believe that the Bible plopped down from the sky directly from God, I'm down with that. That's fine. Then it was written by a man with a capital M. Right? But either way, it's by a guy for a bunch of guys, which makes the inclusion of this story all the more astonishing. And you have to ask yourselves, were they not paying attention when this snuck in? Some copy editor put this in right before the run? Or maybe the guys who put the Bible together were a little more raucous than we sometimes think they are. Now, part of the problem is that many of the people today who are the Bible's biggest defenders are extremely not raucous. How's that for a gentle way of saying it? Right? Some of God's biggest PR problems are his biggest fans. Got that? Okay. So what we are going to do is we are going to try to read the Bible as if we've never seen it before. That's what I need to ask you to do. I need to ask you to read this with unvarnished eyes. Now, often when I teach biblical stories, I focus on biblical stories in the prophetic and historical books that are not part of Jewish liturgy. They're not part of the Torah reading. They're not part of the Haftarah. In that case, I don't have to ask Jews to pretend that they've never read it before. Because for sure, they have never read part of the prophetic books that's not in the Haftarot. Christians, on the other hand, know it pretty much by heart. So it's a much tougher assignment for those of you who either are or were Christian. I apologize, but I really need you to try to pretend like you've never seen this before. All right? The other thing that's intriguing about this story is that it's told twice. It's one of the few stories in the Torah that is told twice, once in prose and once in poetry. And we're going to look at both versions together. So chapter 4 is the prose version of this story, and chapter 5 is the poetry version of this story. You don't trust me, I see. All right, the last introductory comment I have to make before we jump right in is to set the scene. So the book of Joshua is one of the most bloody books of the Bible. It's all about the conquest of the land of Canaan by the Israelite tribes as they come out of the wilderness through the east, through Moab, into central Israel, and then they fan north and south. By the end of the book of Joshua, we are told by the author of the book that the Israelites have displaced all the Canaanites, and the land has rest from war. And then the next book starts, the book of Judges, and all the Canaanites are back again. Right? For those of you who have babysat young children and tried to clean up, you're familiar with this concept. Right? So clearly, somewhere between the editing of the book of Joshua and the editing of the book of Judges, there wasn't real coordination. Right? Make of that what you will. I'm not going to get into it. All I want to say is that when our book starts, which is the book of Judges, which comes right after Joshua, it's a mess. There are Canaanite bullies throughout the land of Israel. The Israelite people are living in scattered settlements throughout the country. And every now and then, a judge arises who is able to unify the confederation of people and bring about a temporary victory. But there's two other layers that need to get put on that. The people who brought us the book of Judges were not interested in history the way we're interested in history. They're not interested just in the facts. They're interested in making a point. And the lesson that they want to teach is that when Israel fulfills its covenantal obligations to God and to each other, then no Canaanite or Philistine can oppress them. But when they don't, when they slip back into their sinful ways, then God responds by not protecting them, and then they get overrun by Canaanites again. So the cycle throughout the book of Judges is the Israelites slip into their old lazy ways. Maybe they have a cheeseburger on the sly. Maybe they let a little linen and wool get mixed in their garment. Maybe they sleep with their father's sister. Who knows? But they do something forbidden to us. I want to remind you that those are all forbidden to us. And when they behave in that fashion, then some Canaanite overlord takes over, starts oppressing them in terms of murdering them, taxing them, stealing their crops, taking their women, reading their Kindle, whatever, until at some point the Israelites, that last one they didn't have Kindles, until at some point the Israelites are so demoralized that they realize that on their own they can never solve the problem, and then they cry out to God, and they repent of their sinfulness, and at that point, a judge emerges. And the judge then leads them successfully, brings them together, brings about a victory, and then, alas, the cycle starts all over again. No sooner do Jews have it good than we turn our back on our covenant and we start to do whatever seems to be good in our eyes. This should sound vaguely familiar to you. It's not unlike the 21st century. And at that point, they start to slip all over again. The other thing I will tell you is that this period was a Tea Party member's wet dream and worst fantasy. Because wet dream in the sense that ancient Israel in this period had no government. So if you like small government, and I mean really small government, this would have been the high water mark of Jewish history. There was no permanent government. Everybody had the Torah. Everyone was supposed to follow the Torah. You don't need a government to follow the Torah, right? And so long as they followed the Torah and lived in this loose confederation, then the rules were supposed to be adhered to. Eventually, I will point out to all of you, that didn't work, right? And the Israelites clamored not just for a government, but for a monarchy, right? But the part that is the Tea Party's wet dream is, of course, that this was 200 years of biblical period in which there was absolutely no government whatsoever except for the word of the Lord, right? The nightmare is that the Torah calls for a welfare state in which you have to tithe 20% of your produce for the poor. You have to have compulsory universal education. Everybody gets the same health care. There was universal literacy. So it turns out that in the period where we had no government, we ran more or less a socialist democracy. Take that for what it's worth. You ready for our story now? Here we go. I'm going to read it in English. You have it in front of you also in the Hebrew. I do want to remind you that it was written in the Hebrew. The English is a translation. The people of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord when Ehud was dead. Ehud, you might have figured out from the context, is the previous judge. But he's gone, and so everybody forgets to do good again, and they start to do evil. And the Lord sold them into the hand of Yavin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hatzor, the captain of whose army was Sisera, who lived in Haroshet Hagoyim. Okay, so a couple things to notice here. The evil that comes to them is not coincidental. Right? There is in this biblical story and in many biblical stories a kind of ecology that is morally driven. If you behave morally, then you will be secure and prosperous. And if you behave immorally, then you will be insecure and suffer. Moderns don't like to admit that there's some truth to that. Right? But I will just remind you that our crime rate parallels the gap between the wealthiest and the poorest. I will remind you that when we drive on the freeways in our gas-guzzling cars with one person in the car, none of us get anywhere and we all breathe in that stuff. There is a way in which our collective choices have immediate consequences for our own lives as a community. But they see this not as passive. Welcome, there's a handout sheet over here. You don't have to sneak, but you want to get yourself a handout. So the Bible portrays that as God's activity. We're done? That's it? She took them? Oh. She will pay in the next world for that. She's getting them. Selling them. Yeah, okay. Exactly. Truth is, they're in the Bible. It's sold pretty good already. Okay. So God is the one who is the source of this, which I want to tell you right there is the single most difficult sentence in all of Israelite religion, and it continues to plague Christianity and Islam as well. Right? When a bad thing happens, you're supposed to blame it on a God who's supposed to be loving. But we're not going to talk about that tonight. Tonight we're going to move on and talk about, so there's this king of Canaan who reigns in Hatzor. The first thing I need to tell you about that is that every Canaanite king claimed to be not only the king of the city in which he was king, but king of all of Canaan. Right? He wasn't actually the king of the whole country. The Canaanites didn't have a national government either. Every single city was its own independent country, not unlike Orange County. And I guess Long Beach too. And so every single Canaanite king who was the king of a city claimed to be the king of the whole place. He's doing that as well. And we're told the name of his general, Sisera. The Bible often tells you someone's name in advance of your needing to know. Right? And it's a sign, pay attention to this guy. Right? So Sisera is going to come back into our story, and you need to be paying attention to him. So the people of Israel, by the way, I looked up the traditional definitions of Haroshet Hagoyim, and according to the traditional sources, nobody has a clue what that means. Which is to say, you look up 5 different independent scholars, and they actually, each of them know exactly what the name means. It's just that no 2 of them agree as to what the name means.
Is there any agreement as to where it is geographically, other than, I would assume, near Hatzor someplace?
We have no records whatsoever. We do have a record of Hatzor, but we have no record of this little place. It's kind of like the Mission Viejo of its time. Which is to say, very beautiful to live in, but after it's gone, no one will be able to locate it. I have to remember that this is actually going out to a broader audience. And I put in 10 years of my time too. 5 of the happiest years of my life. And the people of Israel cried to the Lord, for he had 900 chariots of iron, and 20 years he strongly oppressed the people of Israel. Now, the first thing I want to ask you, because you are biblical scholars, because this is the 2nd class in the series, and I'm assuming that 3rd, oh my God, and you're still here. 3rd, and I'm assuming some of you came last year too, so you're even advanced scholars, right? What biblical story does it remind you of? King oppresses them, they cry out to God, help is brought. Pharaoh and Moses, right? So these stories are the literary echoes of the story of the Exodus. And any Israelite listening to this story would immediately put it into that framework, which means you know how the story is going to end, right? So in some way, the drama has been sucked out of the story, right? You know how it's going to end. But the reality is, a good storyteller makes the story interesting because you know how the story is going to end. What makes the story interesting, you see a black and white movie, and there are 2 guys, and they're standing in the street outside of the saloon, it's not Bel Air, and one of them wears a white hat, and one of them wears a black hat. And both of them are holding their arms right over their hip. You know how that scene is going to end. Right? Anyone who has seen a Western knows how that's going to end. But what makes a really good Western is that between their standing out in the street and the guy in the black hat lying on the ground, the way it winds up contains twists that keep your attention. That's true here too. Whoever put this story together knows we know the master plot, right? And knows that we know how the story is going to end, so his challenge is to twist and turn along the way so that we keep being surprised and forget that we actually know how it's going to wind up. That's the drama of the story. Okay, so back to the story. Now, the other thing we know now is that these guys have 900 chariots of iron. What does that tell us about their armed forces? It's pretty big. What do you also have to have chariots? Horses. Okay, so that's two things that the Israelite mules do not pull chariots. I hate teaching city folk. So you have to have horses if you have an army that's chariot-based, right? And that means this is a very technologically advanced community. There's a lot of wealth, and it means they're not in the mountains. Because if you have chariots in the mountains, they don't have shock absorbers on those wheels. You get bounced out of the chariot, right? Chariots are useful for planes, okay? Which is why, by the way, most of the early Israelite settlements were in the mountains, right? Because they didn't have chariots, and they did not want to be visited by chariots. Okay? So the Canaanites got the rich, lush fields down below, and the Jewish cities are way up on the top of the mountains. All right, so they cry out to God, and he oppresses the people for 20 years before they get some relief. And Deborah the prophetess, the wife of Lapidot, judged Israel at that time. Now, this is very important because she's going to be one of our two heroines of the evening. So I want us to stop on that sentence and spend a little time. What does the word Devorah mean?
Bee.
All right, so it means bee or beehive. Right? What do we know about beehives? They're run by queens. Right? So they're a place where the lady is in charge.
But did the people at that time know that it was a female?
I don't know the answer to that question. You have now, Yasher Koach, exceeded my expertise, and I shall go home in shame. But I have a question for you. If the produce of a non-kosher animal is not kosher, for example, the milk of a pig is not kosher, and insects are not kosher, then why is honey kosher? Riddle me that. No, bees are not a clean animal. Jews may not eat bees.
Whatever you said before, I'll man now.
There you go. So we're in there together. We're in there together, my brother. Okay, so Devorah means a beehive, right? And she has a sting, which is, you'll see, very important to how Sisera ends, right? Devorah also comes from the root for the word for word, devar, right? So she's, in a sense, the speaker. And that's going to be her role in this story. She's the one who speaks truth to power. She's the one who speaks and people listen, right? That's what it means to be a judge, right? Now, this is shocking for us today. It would have been shocking for an ancient Israelite to hear too. A woman being a judge. Do you know how many other women we have as judges in the Bible? Zip. None. She's it. Right? So we have this one woman who is it, and the Bible presents her matter of fact and says not only is she a judge, what else is she? She's a prophet. Right? Prophetess, for those of you who don't speak ancient English, is the equivalent of lioness to a lion. Right? A lion is a boy lion. A lioness is the one who has to do the hunting. Right? A prophetess is a lady prophet. Okay? So she's a prophet, which means she has communication with God. Right? Not only is she a judge, but she's a prophet. So that lifts her up above several of the other judges. And she is, the translation chooses the meaning for Eshet Lapidot, but there's another way to translate. Eshet can also mean, well, that's how they translate it. What else can it mean? A woman. And Lapidot? Lapidot is a flashing stone like lightning. right? So there's this flashing lightning that comes from this bee, this stinging bee, this word, right? She's a woman of electric words. She's a woman of a storm-like sting, right? The name is already echoing and anticipating who she is, right? You have to look at this like literature or you're going to miss much of what the Bible is trying to communicate, right? And she's the judge. And she dwells under the palm tree of Devorah, the Tomer Devorah, between Ramah and Beit El in Mount Ephraim. And the people of Israel come to her lemishpat, which they translate here as judgment. Other way to translate mishpat? Pardon me?
Sentence.
No, it does not mean sentence in that sense. That's modern Hebrew. Right? Mishpat in biblical Hebrew means justice. Right? Tzedek u'mishpat. Right? So she is someone who they come to for justice. Right? Mishpat means it's really balanced. Right? So there is a rightness about her stinging words, about her electric judgments. Right? And she has this tree that she sits at. Here's something I will share with you that I absolutely love. Medieval observant traditional commentators make a point to point out that the reason she sat under a palm tree to judge is because, you know, men are not allowed to be alone in a private place with a woman who's not their sister or daughter or mother, because they will be suspected of lewdness. Right? So she sat outside just so everyone would know it was completely kosher. Take that for what it's worth. So she sits under this tree and she's known. People come to her. She doesn't go to them. They come to her when they need someone to act as a judge, someone to administer justice. Okay? And in the biblical period, there was always one. So you went to the judge of your generation, and there was never more than one at any given time. Okay? So she's it. That means the whole generation is going to her. Okay. So she sends for Barak, the son of Avinoam, from Kedesh Naphtali, and says, "Hasn't the Lord God of Israel commanded, saying, 'Go and gather your men to Mount Tabor, and take with you 10,000 men of the sons of Naphtali and the sons of Zebulun?'" What is the meaning of the word Barak? Thunder. Great. So we got the lightning woman and the thunder guy. Right? That's not a coincidence. Right? There's a storm coming, people. Right? These two people are going to make a storm that will be remembered to the end of time. Okay? And this storm guy, this thunder guy, who is all sound but there's nothing to see. Right? That's thunder. Right? And this woman who isn't a big roar, but watch out for the jolt, right? She reminds him, apparently God has already told him to gather an army made up of the men from two tribes. Right? The way men were mustered in the tribal period, there was no draft. A leader would arise, people would rally around the leader, and they would go and fight. So they're going to take two of the northern tribes around Mount Tabor, and they're going to muster for war. But she has to remind him, which means he's been holding back. Right? The way she says that, it only makes sense if he already knows that God is going to be expecting him to do this, but he is for some reason refusing. You're not supposed to do that, by the way. Give me an example in the Bible where God says do something. What do people do at that point? They do it. Not only do they do it, God says to Abraham, sacrifice your son. It says Abraham gets up early the next morning. Haskem b'boker. Right? He rises up early. Right? God says to Moses, go down to Egypt, tell Pharaoh. He doesn't just lounge around. He goes. Right? Creator of the world tells you to do something. That means now. Right? So the fact that he's not doing it now means he's deliberately stalling. So we got to find out what's going on here. Right? And I will draw to you to the river Kishon Sisera, the captain of Yavin's army with his chariots and his multitude, and I will deliver him into your hand. Now she's already tipping us off as to what's coming. Who's going to win this battle? She is. I know we are, but that's given. Thank you very much, Ra, for us. That's not the point. The point is, it's not going to be the general who's going to get the triumph. And she's already told him that. I will bring this guy down for you. Right? That's something that the general doesn't understand, but we do. Because we know how the story is going to end. Right? Because this is actually a haftarah. So you have actually heard this even if you don't remember it. Okay? So she tells him what he's got to do, where he's got to do it. There's a specific river. You go there. Why would you go to a river to fight a guy with chariots?
Because they can't cross the river.
They can't cross the river, and it's really muddy. Right? So that's actually a good place that you don't want to fight a chariot on dry ground. Right? You want to go where it's muddy and they're not going to be able to use the chariots. Right? So she tells him this, and his response is, if you will go with me, then I will go. And if you will not go with me, then I will not go. How are we meant to hear that? What is that? Okay, so one thing to say is the man's a wimp. Right? If he doesn't have mommy go with him, he's not going to go. I remember when I was a kid, and I'm not complaining, I've gotten over it, but there was a bully who lived on my block, and he delighted when he got home from school, his form of entertainment was beating me up. Which I imagine is fairly entertaining, but it wasn't to me. So I would do what seemed and seems to me like the only reasonable thing to do, which is I would run home and lock the door behind me. But the only thing more scary than Skippy Fogarty and I've forgiven him, I have, was Barbara Artson, my mother, who grew up in the rough and tumble town of Teaneck, New Jersey, where boys did not run inside and lock their door when there was a bully outside. They went out and faced him like a man. I was facing him like a man. I was facing him like a Jewish man. But this wasn't enough for my mother that I got beaten up once in the afternoon. She would make me actually go outside and go out onto the street again. I had to get beaten up twice to be able to stay inside. So one way to understand Barak is that he was a sensitive Jewish soul. All right? He wasn't given to these fisticuffs and violence. He wanted to be able to talk things through. And we're supposed to, in a sense, read him as a wimp. Of course, another way to read him is as pious. Right? There's a prophet of the Lord, and she will bring about the victory. Right? When Joshua fought the battles and Moses was still alive, did Moses go with Joshua? You betcha he did. And when he held his arms up, Joshua and his forces won. And when he put his arms down, he lost. Maybe Barak remembered his Moses stories. And he said, I'm not going without you. I'm going to get whooped if I do that. Right? But I do think the story is meant to play on our sexism. Right? Which is, however feminist you may define yourself to be, however equal you may think women are, it is unseemly in a national saga to have the general of the army tell a woman, I'm not going if you don't come with me. Welcome. So he tells her this, and she reveals that she is one tough broad, because her response to him is, I will surely go with you. However, that the journey you take will not be for your honor, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. Okay. What does he think she just said? That she's going to take care of it. What has she in fact just said? God is not a woman. I'm sorry. Yael is going to take care of it, right? If we know the end of the story, we know that what she said is technically right, although he didn't get it. Right? She is telling him something that will happen, but hasn't yet happened. And that is, there will be a woman who will get the credit for this. Won't be me and won't be you. Right? So she is speaking words of prophecy, that is to say truth, but nobody knows what they mean, which, by the way, means you should be very careful about people who prophesy, because the very best of them will tell you the truth in such a way that you have no clue what they're actually saying. Right? And those are the good ones. The bad ones will just make it up as they go along. I flew back, sorry, we have a little time for this. I flew back on a flight from Dallas. And it turns out that I was upgraded to business class, very nice, until I sat down next to a woman who had fingernails the size of the Empire State Building. They were still coated in the blood of her last victim. And she had a Bible so big that it was a weapon of mass destruction. And she saw the beanie on my head. That's always bad. Always bad. When people ask me on planes what I do for a living, when I think about it ahead of time, I tell them that I'm a professor of medieval religious philosophy. Nobody has anything they want to say to a professor of medieval religious philosophy. But every now and then I slip and I forget and I say I'm a rabbi. Oy vavoy, don't ever say that on a plane. So I slipped. I was distracted by the bloody nails and the big Bible. And I told her I was a rabbi, and she smiled that beatific TV evangelical smile and said to me, "You know, I am a prophet of the Lord." Okay, I'm ready to go back to the galley now. No, I didn't know that, I said. She said, and the Lord has given me a message for you. You, she said, are to go to Barcelona and bring peace among the nations. Now, that's pretty good, right? I'm assuming that the Lord is springing for the flight, right? I've heard good things about Barcelona. That would be actually pretty nice. And if, as a side venture, I can bring peace among the nations while I'm in my, bikini bottoms on the beach, all the better. And then she ruined it. She said, and then you will go on to Poland, where you will bring peace among the nations. And I said, listen, lady. We have been to Poland already. It did not end very well. I am willing to heed a call from the Lord to go to Barcelona. I will even go to Provence or the south of France. Tuscany, I will bring peace in Tuscany, but I am not bringing peace to the nations in Poland. And then she said, I'm a follower of Jesus. Yeah. Got that. And she said, so I want you to know this message comes from Jesus. So when you get the phone call, remember that it came from Jesus. Which I, in good conscience, could tell her I would do. And all I would say to you is that in some ways he may be different than other men, but in remembering to call his friends, Jesus is just like every other guy. Back to our regularly scheduled program. Devorah arose And she went with Barak to Kadesh. And Barak called Zebulun and Naphtali, the two tribes, to Kadesh, and he went up with 10,000 men at his feet, and Devorah went with him. Right, so you can see now the war is about to start. We're about to do this amazing thing. Now, Heber the Canaanite, who was of the descendants of Hovav, the father-in-law of Moses, had separated himself from the Canaanites and pitched his tent near the terebinth of Zaananim, which is nearby Kadesh. Now, why are we told this all of a sudden? Who are the Canaanites? Let's remember our Bible history, shall we? Right? The Canaanites are the tribe of Moses' in-laws. Remember when he fled Egypt and he's in the wilderness, right? And those muscular women are shepherding their flocks, right? So those are Kenite women, right? Pardon me? They are Midianites and Kenites because there are different sources in the Bible, right? So sometimes the man who heads that tribe is called Hobab, and sometimes he's called Yitro, correct. But it's the same guy. Oh. That you say, oh, I give you an hour of information and this gets an hour. So,
Did that name appear before this section?
Hobab, yes, it's in the book of Exodus, but you didn't pay attention to it because you knew they were talking about Jethro, so you just read it as Jethro.
Probably.
No, we all do that. We all do that. I mean, every time we read the Bible, and we generally read the Bible as though we already know everything it says. And so when it says something we don't expect it to say, it's not so much that we disregard it, we just don't see it. For example, you all know for a matter of certainty that God doesn't have a body. Right? And so when you get to that passage in the Bible where it says that God walks through the garden in the heat of the day, it's not like you say, oh, that's a mistake. You just don't see it. Or when it says that Moses goes to the top of the mountain and there he sees a throne, and on the throne is sitting the Lord, and under the Lord's feet are stones the color of some stone. Right? You don't see that God has feet, which implies that he's also got a Schwanzstocher and everything else, right?
Doesn't he have to have a body since we were created in his image?
Well, not all of our bodies are as divine as everyone else's. But I thank you for noticing and for the compliment. And we are not going to be distracted by Maimonidean theological assertions here. So whether God has to have a body or not, you're going to have to bring me back for a separate talk on that one. And I don't think after Gotti listens to this recording, he's going to have me back anytime soon. So when we read the Bible and we read things that don't fit our preconceptions, we just don't see it. So he is consistently, in the book of Exodus, called by those two names based on which source is woven in. But because we all know you can only have one father-in-law, at most, we know that it has to be the same guy, and so we just call him Jethro, right? Because it sounds more Tennessee-like. So Heber is a member of that tribe, okay? And I want you to look at the word Heber and tell me what that reminds you of. Chaver, spelled exactly the same way as a chaver, a colleague, a friend. Right? Notice that everyone in this story has a literary name. Right? Everyone's name means something. Right? So we know he's a buddy. Right? If you were translating the story and translating the names, you would translate his name as the buddy. Right? So he's a buddy and he's a Kenite. Right? And he's a descendant of Hovav, who is a righteous Gentile. Right? Hovav is the one who takes Moses in. He's the one who sides with him. He's the one who moves in with him. He tells him how to organize the governance of the Jews, a feat that has not been equaled in our own time. Right? Although God knows we've tried. Right? And he separates himself from the Kenites. Why is that important? Well, it's important for two reasons. The first is the Kenites have made a contractual arrangement with the Canaanites of Hatzor. So they've been bought out. They're now working for the bad guys. But so he, in separating from them, has separated on a symbolic level. He doesn't politically stand where they stand. But more importantly, his tent is in isolation. So that if, for example, you were a general fleeing a losing battle, you might be tempted to go not into the center of the city, but to the tent all alone out there that no one would be inclined to check.
Oops.
All right, well, that's going to be a mistake, I understand. Correct.
Would you repeat what you just said?
The last hour?
Yeah.
So his tent has been separated from the other Canaanites. His tribe of Canaanites, the Kenites, has made a contract with Hatzor, so they're the bad guys. If you were a general fleeing a battle you had just lost, and what you wanted to do was not be discovered, you would be tempted to go to the tent that's all by itself way out there, rather than the middle of the city where everyone's going to think you're running. And so it works out too. Okay. And they told Sisera that Barak, the son of Avinoam means Avi is Abba Shali, my father. Noam, comfort, gentleness, right? And who are we talking about when we have a name like my father is comforting? God, right? These are theophoric names. That's, by the way, a word not to say on a first date because they'll think you're a jerk. Trust me on that. Right? So theophoric, it is a God derivative name, which many of the biblical names are. Right? So he's not like, you can be sure that his mom did not think that way about his dad. That would not, she would be naming him cheapskate or doesn't appreciate his wife or something like that. My name, in case you were wondering, Brad Lee, is the Anglo-Saxon for a broad field. Field. A Lee is a field. Right? So Brad, Broad, Lee. I told my mother that my constant weight struggles are nothing more than the living out of the name she gave me. And if she had given me the Anglo-Saxon for buns of steel, I could have had an entirely different life. So Avinoam is a religious name, right? My father is comfort. My father is peace. And it's another way of reminding us we're in good hands. The story's going to work out, right? That's the message that this story is going to repeat over and over again, and that it's going to work out in ways you can't expect. So don't look for the Lord to intervene in the places you would expect God's intervention. God works through the pot that's broken. God works through the weak and the crooked and the outcast, right? The places that people look to as glorious and powerful are not in God's vision, right? So here too we've got this outcast guy, this poor general who is all thunder and no lightning, but his father is a comforter, right? And so this guy goes up to Mount Tabor, and Sisera gathers all of his chariots, 900 chariots of iron, and all the people are with him from Haroshet HaGoyim to the river Kishon. You may turn the page. And Devorah said to Barak, "Arise, for this is the day in which the Lord has delivered Sisera into your hand. Has not the Lord gone out before you?" So Barak went down from Mount Tabor, and 10,000 men after him. Notice what she says, kum. Kum means not only get up, but it's a kind of spiritual ascent. Right? What do we say when we take the Torah out of the ark? Kuma Adonai, rise up, Lord. Scatter your enemies before you. Right? That's this kind of Deuteronomic language. Right? That rising up is muster yourself, awaken, pay attention, do something. Right? So she's speaking now prophetic speech. Right? Rise up because it's as good as done. God has gone out before you. That's exactly what we say when we take the Torah out of the ark. Right? It is a triumphal procession. Victory is yours already. You just have to focus and get up. So, the Lord confounded Sisera and all his chariots and all his army with the edge of the sword before Barak, so that Sisera alighted down from his chariot and fled away on foot. What does that mean? What just happened? The chariots didn't work. Right? The river got muddy. There was a flood. Commentators say different possibilities. But for one reason or another, by this river, the chariots all got bogged down, such that when your chariot gets bogged down, you have no advantage staying in the chariot. In fact, you had better find some other locale pronto. Right? So everyone now is scattering because all of Sisera's forces are charioteers. Right? So he's now in big trouble. So off he goes, and he's running away on foot, which means he has no advantage whatsoever and a significant disadvantage. And Barak pursued after the chariots and after the army to Haroshet Hagoyim, and all the army of Sisera fell upon the edge of the sword, and there was not a man left. What battle does that remind you of in the Bible? I'm looking for an army in which the behavior of water neutralized an enemy, and not a man is left alive. You are an uncommonly bright class. Right? So this is another echo of the Pharaoh confrontation. And remember, the Pharaoh confrontation is not just the conflict of two armies or even two people. It's the conflict between the Lord of the universe, who is the embodiment of goodness and righteousness and decency, as opposed to the gods of Egypt, who are the embodiment of power and greed and hierarchy. Well, that's the same battle here, right? Chariots are something that comes from Egypt. The Canaanites get that from the Egyptians, right? So you've got the same battle going on between the simple folk who don't have money, don't have organization, don't have power, and the people who have all the money, all the clout, all the hierarchy. I'm not here making a dig about the contemporary election. Okay, maybe a little one. And Sisera fled away on foot to the tent of Yael, the wife of Hever the Canaanite, for there was peace between Yavin the king of Hatzor and the house of Hever the Canaanite. Now here's the next question. What does the name Yael mean? Right? It means, well, God in English, but you can't, it's hard to translate. Yah is part of God's actual name. Right? And don't get over literal with me. I'm just saying in Hebrew thought, Yah is a part of God's name. We don't say the whole name. Okay? Well, we don't say it, so let's not say it. Right? But Yud He Vav He is that full name. You'll notice if you just pronounce the first two letters, you got Yah. Okay? So in biblical Hebrew, often Yah is a substitute for the entire name, or Yahoo, where the old party chant comes in, right? So one of the kings of Israel is Chizki Yahu, right? Chizki meaning my strength, and Yahu meaning let's party. So Yael is, Yah is God, meaning this particular deity is really God, not those other deities. not those other Canaanite deities, not those other Egyptian deities. And Yah, or Yud-He-Vav-He, is, it turns out, the God of the Israelite Confederation. Right? They marched out of Egypt in the service of this radical God. Right? A God who doesn't recognize power or wealth or pomp, but who recognizes human community and principles of tzedek umishpat, justice. Okay? So the fact that that's her name is also tipping the hat, right? The couple is, he's our buddy, and Yah is God. Okay? And the other thing I will tell you about followers of Yah is that they're pretty strong in their convictions, then as now, which we will now see her enact. And there's a contract between Yavin and the Kenites, including Hever. So presumably, when the general shows up at their doorstep, he assumes that he is going to be greeted hospitably, and he will be welcomed, and he will be able to seek shelter in this home. That's not an unreasonable assumption for Yavin's general to assume. Come on into my tent, big boy. And then she puts a nice big blanket all over him, right? And what the story keeps bouncing back and forth in a way that is fascinating, even if you're not Freudian, is there's a very fine line between erotic and infantile. Is she acting like his mommy, or is she acting like his mama? Not clear throughout the story. Right? So she tucks him into bed. He accepts her invitation without a word. And then he says to her, "Give me, I beg you," he's being very polite, "a little water to drink, for I am thirsty." Now this is a guy who's just had his Canaanite butt kicked by the Israelite army, so he's being very polite and very humble, mostly because he's scared that he's going to get killed by the Israelites. Right? So you have this biblical language that is very gracious, and all he's asking for is a little water. And what does she do? She brings him milk, right? Which is, there's mama again. Although I will remind those of you who must read these things in a smutty way, that milk comes from breasts. So it's also, for those of you who are looking for such things, a kind of erotic message, right? So she brings him the milk, and that is also an act of chesed. Chesed is when you do something beyond what someone has requested, right? He asks for water, she brings him milk. But milk, it turns out, is also a soporific. That's a fancy word for makes you sleepy. It doesn't mean anything other than make you sleepy, but most people don't know what it means, so you win points when you use it. Right? So she gives him a skin of milk, gives him a drink, and then covers him. And then he says, "Stand in the door of the tent, and it shall be when any man comes and asks you and says, 'Is there anyone here?' say no." I want to ask you, is this in that same polite tone? No. All of a sudden, you give the guy a bed, you give him a little milk to drink, you give him a warm blanket, and he becomes Mr. Boss Me Around and tell me what to do. Right? Things have not changed, ladies, in lo these many years. Right? But at that point, that's our clue that he is no friend of hers. And so we're ready, in a sense, for what's about to happen. And here it comes. Then Yael, Hever's wife, then God is God, the buddy's woman, takes a peg of the tent. You all know what a peg is shaped like, I trust. I don't have to make that explicit. And she took a hammer in her hand, and she went softly to him. Softly to him, ladylike in her steps. And then she smashed that peg into his temple, fastened it into the ground, because after all, he was fast asleep and very tired. I love the fact that whoever wrote this story felt like we should know that last detail. Right? Well, you're being very nice. I mean, one way to look at it is the order is wrong. He was asleep, and so she walked in softly. On the other hand, he's not asleep, he's dead. So, and so he died. Now, a couple things to notice here. Generally, and I don't mean to be crass in front of such an elegant group of people, but generally, both in life and in literature, it is the man who holds the peg, and it is the man who drives the peg into the woman, if you gather my drift. Right?
Yes.
Good, I'm glad you got it. There's life in the old broad yet. So, the author of this story is messing with us here. Right? This is on purpose. This is not just a coincidence. This is an inversion of our normal expectations. But part of our expectations is men enter women, and part of our expectation is men dominate women, and men have power, and men do politics, and women serve food and clean up. And in this story, it's not going to happen that way. This is a story in which the women literally rise up, and they have to say to the guys, we're going to show you how it's done. Right? So the one who leads the army into battle is a woman, Devorah. The one who actually takes this general down, and then takes him down in the most disgusting way possible, is the righteous woman, Yael. Right? And we're told she drives it. It's not enough we have to be told she sticks it into his head. By the way, this gives a whole different meaning to were you in temple this morning? Right? And I can imagine her answer, yes, but it was a little too heady for me. Sorry, if you wanted something at a higher class, you should have gone, whatever. Fine, so back to this. She not only drives the peg in, she drives it so far that his head is now stuck to the floor. Right? This is with feeling. And strength. You don't mess with Jewish women. There you go. Thank you very much. You may have lost popularity, but I think that's great. She was driving the point home. Okay. And behold, as Barak pursued Sisera, whose name kind of means turn in, and boy, did he turn in, Yael came out to meet him. Notice again, women don't do that in biblical society. Right? But she's not the meek, demure, inside the tent woman. She's like coming in, inviting in, knocking him off, coming back out, pulling in the general. This is a lady in charge. The Hillary Clinton of her day. So she says, come, and I will show you the man whom you seek. And when he came into her tent, behold, Sisera lay dead, and the peg was in his temples. Why, by the way, temples and not temple? Because there's got to be the one you would never go to. I'm not letting you off. I'm not letting you off. This is going to go on all night. So God subdued. You know you're going to be telling these jokes tomorrow to other people. So God subdued on that day Yavin, the king of Canaan, before the people of Israel. And the hand of the people of Israel prospered and prevailed against Yavin, the king of Canaan, until they had destroyed Yavin, the king of Canaan. Okay, so that's the prose version of the story, and I promised to let you out on time, which is to say 9:30. So we have 45 minutes to do the poetry. Ready? Here we go. If you want to leave at 9 o'clock, you go right ahead. I'm going to go till 9:30, and those who want to leave, in fact, if you want to leave, you heard this, you know how it ends. Then sang Devorah and Barak, the son of Abinoam, on that day. Notice who's singing. No, got to read what the words say, not what you want them to say. Who's singing? Devorah and Barak. Right? This is not meant to disgrace him. Right? At least in this version, he's a hero too. This is a triumphal song they both sing, which suggests that maybe Barak isn't a wimp. Maybe Barak is a feminist. Maybe Barak doesn't have a problem with women warriors. Maybe he actually likes strong women. Right? And so she says, well, if I go, I'm going to take the credit. And he says, all right, what do I care? So long as we win, that's great, terrific, take the credit. You deserve the credit, take the credit. And then when she gets up to sing, he says, this is worth singing about. Look at what kick-ass women we got here. Right? I think that's a great model for us, and maybe that's why his dad is Avinoam. Right? Maybe if men were able to enjoy powerful women instead of feeling threatened by them, maybe they also could know a bit of comfort in life. Right? So it's an interesting model. In chapter 5, there's no mockery left. Right? It's all glory. Praise the Lord for the avenging of Israel, when people willingly offered themselves. Now that's an important point. In ancient Israel, there's no draft. Right? People are called to fight by a judge, and the entire people muster to fight. Right? So nobody's left out, and everyone fights in the common defense. Right? That's a different model than we're used to, but worth your considering. Hear, O you kings, give ear, O you princes, and I will sing to the Lord, I will sing praise to the Lord, God of Israel. Lord, when you went out of Seir, when you marched out of the field of Edom, the earth trembled and the heavens dropped, the clouds also dropped water. What are they talking about here? Storm. And why do we need to know about a storm? Well, so one is we got an echo of that thunder and lightning, right? We've got Lapidot and Barak. Why else? The chariots, right? The chariots, right? Turns out that this was really, really bad weather, which was understood as being God's destroying the chariots. Right? Those of you who are bucky on European history, that's to say expert in European history, will remember the Protestant winds, which were the winds that when King Charles sent an armada to go to England to destroy Queen Elizabeth and her Anglican heresy on behalf of the Roman Catholic Church, and his flotilla was wiped out by a storm on the way to England, which of course everyone in England to this day remembers is the Lord taking the Protestant side against the Catholics. Same idea here, right? It's all about timing. Okay, and the other thing it reminds us is that Yah is a sky god. Right? He's a god of thunder and lightning. He's a god of storms. Right? He is that in Canaanite pantheon where Yah is one god of many, but he is the sky god and the storm god. In the Israelite religion, he's the only god. Right? But still, if you ask a Jew or a Christian or a Muslim, point to God, this is where you point. Right? Sometimes you correct yourself and you point here, but that just means you're New Age and you've studied with a heretical rabbi. The mountains melted from before the Lord. That's Sinai, before the Lord God of Israel. So God is the one who thunders from the mountains. In the days of Shamgar, the son of Anat, who was an earlier judge, in the days of Yael, the main road ceased, and travelers walked through crooked back roads. Why would that be? Well, could be the water. I think it's actually something else. Bandits, right? It means it's a lawless age. Right? There is no safety. There is no justice. If you go on the main road, you're going to get mugged. Right? So you got to drive the back roads, right? Which is what people had to do. And the inhabitants of the villages ceased. Why? Because it's dangerous. They ceased in Israel until Devorah arose, a mother in Israel. Look at the verb used for Devorah, right? Is she rises up, right? Shekamti, right? Same verb we saw before, kum, like kuma Adonai. She rises up. That's warrior talk, right? And beautifully, the language here is no longer judge or prophet. What is she now? Mother. She's our mother, right? What an amazing tradition to be able to teach our sons and our daughters that being a mother means you rise up in defense of your children and you obliterate the enemy.
Is the I, Devorah, supposed to be there, the I? It sounds like she's narrating it about herself.
That's correct. It sure does, doesn't it? It's out of her words. I don't think it's a mistake. It's I, Devorah. They chose new gods. Then was war in the gates, and was there a shield or a spear seen among the 40,000 in Israel? My heart goes out toward the rulers of Israel, who offered themselves willingly among the people. Bless the Lord. Notice the poet continues to turn this back to God. Right? The drama is God's, the glory is God's, the victory is God's. My heart goes out, okay. Speak, you who ride on tawny asses, you who sit on couches, and you who walk on the road. Louder than the voices of the archers in the places of drawing water, there shall they recite the righteous acts of the Lord, the righteous acts towards the inhabitants of his villages in Israel, when the people of the Lord go down to the gates. Right, so the theme of this poem, in case you missed it in the story, is that the hero of the story is not Yael. The hero of the story is not Devorah. The hero of the story is God. Right? And God can work through Ehud, who is left-handed. God can work through Devorah, who is a woman. God continually in this book uses blemished, imperfect judges. And it is a sign of God's might that God can bring salvation even through those that human beings have discarded. Right? So that's why she's going to repeat this over and over again. And then we get the famous Debbie Friedman line, awake, awake, Devorah, awake, awake, utter a song, arise, Barak, she left that part out, and lead away your captives, you son of Avinoam. So this is a triumphant song. This is a song of exaltation. Right? Then he made him who remains have dominion over the nobles among the people. The Lord made me have dominion over the mighty. Who's the me? Devorah. Right? So this song is being put in Devorah's mouth. Right? She's the one who now has rule, and the rule has been given to her by God. Right? So this is not a woman unafraid to brag about power. Out of Ephraim there was a root of them against Amalek. After you, Benjamin, with your tribes, from Machir came down leaders of Zebulun, those who handled the marshal's staffs. So she's now reading off the various tribes and sub-tribes that participated in this confederation. The princes of Issachar were with Devorah, Issachar and also Barak. Into the valley they rushed at his feet. In the divisions of Reuven, great were their resolve. You may turn the page. Why then did you sit among the sheepfolds to hear the bleating of the flocks? For the divisions of Reuben, there were great searchings of heart. Apparently, there were some people from Zebulun and Manasseh who felt that the tribe of Reuben did not carry their fair share. Right? And they got bitter about it, and they put it in a song that will be remembered through all the ages of mankind. Gilad dwells beyond the Jordan, and why did Dan remain by his ships? Asher continued on the seashore and abode by his bays. Zebulun was a people who risked their lives to the death, and Naphtali likewise on the high places of the field. How do the tribes work in confederation? How they feel about each other? It's not working so great, is it? Right? Well, not only competitive, that's really your fight. We're going to stay home, thank you very much. Right? So the people who go to war are bitter about the tribes that don't. The tribes that don't are quite happy to sit this one out, thank you very much. But this song gets written by the people who fought the fight. The kings came and fought. Then fought the kings of Canaan in Taanach by the waters of Megiddo. They took no gain of silver. They fought from heaven. The stars in their courses fought against Sisera. The brook of Kishon swept them away, that ancient brook, the brook Kishon. O my soul, march on in strength. So there's what happened that we didn't hear in the prose story. Right? There's a flood, and the flood overruns the chariots. By the way, if you're looking for a biblical line to write on a little card and put in your wallet to read when times get tough, I want to recommend to you the line that I just read. Right? O my soul, march on in strength. Then did the horse hooves beat from the frantic galloping of his mighty ones. Curse Meroz, said the angel of the Lord, curse bitterly its inhabitants, because they came not to the help of the Lord against the mighty men. Blessed above women shall Yael, the wife of Hever, the Canaanite, be. Blessed shall she be above women in the tent. What's the contrast?
She did something active, the others just sort of stayed home.
Good. So this is the good girls never win battles. Right? So don't be a good girl anymore. Right? My mic went off?
Yeah, the battery person.
How do you know the battery's dead?
Because I heard the crackle.
Maybe it's a judgment of God. Hello? No. All right, I shall now project. Are you okay?
I'm okay.
Every time I ask him if he's okay, he does this as though he's in the sound room and I'm not. We're in the same room right now.
You're okay.
I just try saying that without your thumb for a minute.
You're okay.
Nice, got it. All right, so notice that what's different about her is she's a badass girl. Women in Israel are supposed to stay in the tents. Women who stay in tents never take down enemy soldiers. They miss the action. She's the one who causes the action. She goes and makes it happen. If you are waiting for justice to find you, you will wait forever. You must rise up and you must bring it about. You must be the miracle that you are waiting for. God will work through you. But if you sit in the tents, it will not happen to you, and it will not happen to your neighbors. Right? So she is blessed above these other women because she's not a woman in the tents. And he asks for water, and she gave him milk. She brought forth cream in a lordly dish. Whatever that means. No one has ever brought me cream in a lordly dish. Although I had a cat once. She put her hand to the tent peg, and her right hand to the workman's hammer. And with the hammer she struck Sisera, She struck through his head. She crushed and pierced his temple. By the way, what position is he in when she does this? Well, I just want to remind you that in the prose version, he's in bed, tucked in, and asleep already. But look what happens in this version. At her feet he bent, he fell, he lay down. At her feet he bent, he fell. Where he bowed, there he fell down, bereft of life. What position was he in? He's standing up. He's standing up. Right? He's not asleep in this story. She's not some meek little mouse to be pussyfooting around. Right? When she intends to kill a Canaanite general, he's going to know that she's taking him down. Right? And so she takes not just any old hammer, she has a worker's hammer. Right? And she takes that peg and he sees it coming. Right? And he dies, according to the Hebrew, between her legs. As if we hadn't noticed the implications before. And it says twice, he died between her legs. Lucky guy. Now we switch scenes. The mother of Sisera, that is to say, the guy who just died, looked out at the window and cried through the lattice, "Why is his chariot so long in coming? Why do the hoofbeats of his chariots tarry?" Now there's a moment of poignancy here. Right? Here's this poor mother. I just want to remind you, this is kind of like reading about Goering's mother. Just before you have too much sympathy for this lady. Right? So there's this mom, though, and she's looking out and saying, "Why isn't he home yet? Why isn't he home, my little Bubala Sisera?" Right? Not actually Bubala, because, right? And she wants to know why he's home, and her ladies answer her and say, "Have they not found booty? Have they not divided the plunder? To every man a maiden or two. To Sisera a booty of diverse colors, a plunder of many-colored needlework, dyed wonder-worked garments for the necks of those who take the plunder." Right, so how do they comfort this poor mom who's worrying about her son? He's raping and pillaging, so don't feel bad, Ma. Right, that is to say, don't feel sympathy for this woman. But the one thing they tell her that's right is there are two women who are delaying him. And that, it turns out, is true. Right? So much so that you will never see him again. And then the poem ends with that beautiful religious sentiment. "So let all your enemies perish, O Lord, but let those who love him be as the sun when he goes forth in his might." And the land had rest for 40 years. Now, that's the lesson of the poem. Right? Those who love the Lord will know peace. Those who hate the Lord shall perish in this fashion. So here's what I want to ask you as we wind up. According to this story, what does it mean to hate the Lord? Is that a theological issue? Meaning you don't believe the right thing, so therefore you hate God? No. Is that you're a member of the wrong religion, you don't pray in my church? No. What does it mean to hate the Lord? Lack of justice. To oppress God's people. To terrorize the weak. To take advantage of women. Right? That's what it means to hate the Lord. And people who hate the Lord, that's not to say do they believe or not, how fervently do they pray or not, how much do they tithe or not. It's, do you live a life of justice? Are you concerned about those who have not? Are you concerned about the dignity of women? Are you concerned about God's people? Right? If you are not, you will go down. Pharaoh was taken down. Sisera was taken down. Yavin is taken down. But if you live your life devoted to principles of justice and inclusion and human dignity, then you will be raised up. And then you also can sing songs of triumph. And look, this is a story about two people who would have been disregarded. Two people who are unimportant. One because she's a woman, one because she's a woman and a Canaanite living in a lone tent. She's a nobody. Right? But the God of the Hebrews is a God who doesn't think that anybody is a nobody. And God is never finished working through us. There is no person too small, too insignificant to be the focal point for God's justice erupting into the world. That's what this story teaches us. And it comes to us through two of the most extraordinary women in all of Western literature. This bee like lightning speaker of truth, and this Yah is God woman whose husband is a nice guy. He's a buddy, but he's never in the story. Because God will work through these remarkable women. And my blessing to you is that you should know you are their daughters and sons. And that you have their blood in you, and you have their spirit if you rise to reach it. There are Yavins and Siseras today who strike down by deciding that some matter and some don't, who think that women matter less than men, who think that there are some who are the chosen and some who are the despised. Your choice is to sit quietly in your tent or to rise up and stand against it. And if you do, then and only then are you a lover of God. Shalom.